Good evening. My name is Vivian Hamilton, and it's my honor to serve as president of the ACLU of Virginia Board of Directors. Thank you all for joining our annual meeting. Every year, the ACLU of Virginia gathers with our members to report on the state of civil rights and civil liberties in Virginia. This year, we've seen shocking attacks on our fundamental freedoms, but we are fighting back with the full force of the ACLU. Just last week, Virginia voters elected pro-civil rights candidates up and down the ballot. The message was clear. Virginians won't stand for attacks on our civil rights. The ACLU is nonpartisan and doesn't endorse candidates, but we knew it was critical to educate voters on candidates' positions, and namely whether candidates would protect their civil rights. That's why we made our largest investment to date in Virginia voter education. For example, in the run-up to the election, the ACLU sent more mail to voters about Virginia's Attorney General race than any group other than the parties themselves. That means we carried the message on civil rights and civil liberties. Tonight, we're going to talk a bit about what's possible now that pro-civil rights candidates are in office in Virginia. We'll talk about how we're defending against federal overreach, how we're proactively fighting to protect Virginians' liberties, and how you can join the fight. Excuse me. We can't do this work alone. Excuse me. It takes all of us, from members like you, to our donors and supporters, to our grassroots partners across the Commonwealth. Sorry. Together we'll work to create a Virginia for all, no exceptions. To kick us off, our Executive Director, Mary Bauer, has narrated a brief overview of our fight against the administration's unlawful actions this past year. Here's just a sample of some of the ways we fought to defend civil rights and civil liberties in the Commonwealth in 2025.
Hi, my name is Mary Bauer, and I am the Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Virginia. Since President Trump's inauguration, the ACLU has filed well over 150 lawsuits against the Trump administration's attacks on our civil rights. Here in Virginia, we are using everything we have in our toolbox to defend the Constitution and to shore up our rights here at home. Across the nation, the Trump administration has expanded its ruthless deportation machine, ignored court orders, and ripped families apart. Here in Virginia, we've sued ICE. We've monitored conditions at ICE detention facilities, and we have conducted dozens of Know Your Rights trainings in multiple languages across the Commonwealth. The Trump administration has attacked students and schools. Here in Virginia, we've supported communities that refuse to discriminate against trans and non-binary students. We've sued the Department of Defense Education Activity for removing books from military schools. Across the nation, the Trump administration has tried to silence speech it doesn't agree with by going after people like Mahmoud Khalil, Rumeza Ozturk, and Mohsen Madawi. Here in Virginia, we sued on behalf of a Georgetown professor named Dr. Badr Khan Suri, who was detained by masked ICE agents off the streets of Virginia just for exercising his free speech. We fought hard for months to finally reunite him with his wife and his small children in his home in Arlington. The bottom line is that to get past Virginians, any Virginians, President Trump will have to get past us. And I promise you, we will do our best to ensure that that does not happen. And we are holding the line by shoring up our civil rights and our civil liberties here at home. Protecting our rights takes people power, and that's exactly what we have at the ACLU of Virginia. It's thanks to you that we have the different tools like lawsuits, legislation, and community organizing to fight back. It takes a lot of resources to do this work, but this year we have almost doubled our membership. We are excited because that means there are more Virginians who know their rights, more communities who have an informed neighbor to turn to, and more people who are part of the movement for freedom and justice in our Commonwealth. The highlights I mentioned are just some of the work that your support enabled us to do in 2025. Just imagine what we can do together in 2026 to fight back against federal overreach and to fuel the fight for our own freedom. Together, we can safeguard Virginians' civil rights and civil liberties, no matter who is in office. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eden Heilman. I am the legal director here at the ACLU of Virginia. As Vivian mentioned, we're going to have two panels tonight and then talk about how you, our members and supporters, can get involved. Our first panel will talk about what we're doing on the defensive side to protect against federal overreach in Virginia. Unfortunately, the list is long. So we're going to focus on our immigration work because we've seen some honestly devastating and horrific attacks on immigrants' rights in Virginia. So tonight I have with me Sophia Gregg, our senior immigrants' rights attorney, and Vishal Agraharkar, our senior supervising attorney. As we talk tonight, if folks have questions, please drop them in the Q&A section of the Zoom, not the chat. Okay, so to get us started, immigration arrests are up 358% in Virginia. That's one of the largest increases in the country. Sophia, can you start by talking a little bit about what we're seeing here and how we are responding?
Yes, thank you, Eden. We've seen widespread arbitrary and abusive ICE practices, whether that be on our streets where ICE is conducting roving patrols, targeting people based on their appearance, in our local courts where ICE is stalking the traffic dockets, looking for people charged with violations that may indicate they're non-citizens. Also in jails, detention center, makeshift holding facilities where ICE is subjecting people to unsafe and unsanitary conditions. We have been there. To combat this, we've been providing dozens of Know Your Rights presentations across the Commonwealth to ensure people know how to protect themselves and their communities. We've been showing up at local courthouses to document how ICE is stalking the local courthouses and keeping people from accessing the judicial system. We've been investigating and lobbying against the horrendous conditions where ICE keeps people imprisoned, and we've been suing the Trump administration for its unprecedented and cruel attacks against immigrants in Virginia.
I know we have been very busy, so that's a great recap of that. It's really striking how ICE is showing up in places that were previously off limits, like schools and even courthouses, where due process should be protecting everyone. Vishal, can you talk a little bit about how we're seeing the immigration system be weaponized?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Eden. And thank you to all of our supporters for tuning in today and for supporting our work. So yes, we have seen the administration use immigration policy as a weapon to silence dissent, to punish speech, and to kind of send a message about who belongs and who doesn't. One of the clearest examples of this, and Mary's alluded to this in her video, has been the targeting and detention of lawfully present students and academics who have spoken out, and particularly in support of Palestinian rights or have been critical of Israel. So we saw this with Mahmoud Khalil, who led pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University, with Romesa Ozturk, who co-wrote an op-ed in her student newspaper at Tufts. And here in Virginia, it happened to our client, Badr Khan Suri, who's a postdoc at Georgetown University and lives in Arlington, Virginia. In his case, the government targeted him not just for his own speech, but also because of who his wife is. And she's a US citizen, but she's Palestinian, and her father many years ago held a position in the Gazan government. And to justify detaining Dr. Suri, as well as these other students, the government pointed to this little used provision and vague provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act that authorizes the deportation of anyone that the Secretary of State claims poses a serious adverse foreign policy consequence to the United States. So in each of these cases, that determination was made secretly, and rather than informing Dr. Suri of this, masked agents showed up outside his apartment in unmarked cars to arrest him in the most frightening and public way possible. And then after his arrest, he was brought to multiple locations around Virginia. He was misled into believing that he would be held in Virginia and then all of a sudden put on a plane that he thought was deporting him out of the country. And instead, it took him to a deportation staging facility 1,500 miles away from his family in Louisiana. And meanwhile, his counsel had no idea where he was. So these types of tactics are not only unprecedented, they are illegal. And they're designed to intimidate and to chill speech that this administration doesn't like, and also to evade accountability for its actions. So we challenged Dr. Suri's detention in federal court, and in the process, we got two groundbreaking rulings from the Eastern District of Virginia. So first, the court rejected the government's attempt to manipulate jurisdiction. So normally, a case like this has to be filed where a person is being held at the moment of filing. But the judge found, in our case, that the government's conduct in moving Dr. Suri around the country without notice appeared to be an attempt to prevent a court from reviewing its actions. So the court kept the case in Virginia, recognizing that the government can't play these kinds of jurisdictional games to avoid accountability. And second, the court ordered that Dr. Suri be released while his case proceeds. And so that led to this extraordinary and dramatic moment where we received this ruling in Alexandria with hundreds of supporters in attendance at the courthouse. And that very same day, he was freed. At this point, he was in Texas. He was freed in Texas and allowed to fly back to Dulles Airport, where his family and his supporters were waiting. So the government is now kind of appealing those rulings, and we're going to be arguing in the Fourth Circuit to defend those later this year. But for now, Dr. Suri is reunited with his family. He's able to carry on with his life and his work. And so we're proud, and Sophia on our immigrants' rights team has been leading this work, and we've been proud to kind of fight back against this gross abuse and weaponization of our immigration laws. And we're going to continue fighting back in this case as well as in others.
Thanks, Vishal. And I know it's been absolutely incredible to be a part of that case and to work with you all on that and with Dr. Suri. Now, that's not the only case we have filed this year against ICE or the Trump administration. So, Sophia, if you can you talk a little bit about our more recent case, our special immigrant juvenile status case?
Yeah, definitely. So late in August, early October, we filed a class action case on behalf of 4 young people who came to the United States as unaccompanied minors. So they came here alone to the United States, and they applied for a legal pathway to permanent residency through what's called special immigrant juvenile status. This is a status that is specifically created by Congress for orphaned immigrant children. Even on their way to a lawful pathway to permanent protection, they were caught up in the mass immigration arrests that are plaguing this entire country, and also Virginia specifically to a large degree, as Eden mentioned. They, like many others, have been caught up in these arbitrary arrests, and they've been denied the ability to be released from immigration detention, even though that they have a lawful permanent pathway to immigration status. This immigration status ultimately leads them to become U.S. citizens one day. But because of their detention, if they were to remain in detention, they would be barred from that pathway. And so we filed a class action on behalf of these individuals and a broader group of young people who are similarly situated, asking the court to release them or give them the opportunity for a bond hearing. So they were given, the judge just last week granted our request and issued an order requiring that ICE and the Department of Justice give them the opportunity to be released on bond. We have good decision as of today that 2 of our named plaintiffs will be released today, tonight, hopefully, if not early tomorrow morning. And we have 1 more named plaintiff who we believe will be released by Wednesday. And so we're very hopeful. This is a good sign for the future of the case. So not just for these individuals that we represent, but for the entire class of young people who Congress has sought to specifically protect under the special immigrant juvenile status. And we are fighting for them like many others.
Thank you so much, Sophia. It has really, truly been inspiring to watch this much work happen. And I know all three of us could probably talk for hours about all of this, but we actually only have time for a question or two. So I want to see if there are any in the chat that we can potentially address with the group. Let's see. So the first question we have is, why is ICE allowed to literally drag people out of their homes and places on private property? And I would like to see if I could direct this one to Sophia, if possible.
Yeah, so we get this question a lot, especially when we're doing community presentations and trying to inform people about what their rights are when they encounter ICE. I think what we say is ICE is not allowed. Everybody, regardless of your immigration status, has a Fourth Amendment right to be protected in your home and protected in places that are private. And it's very important that people know those rights. They know what their rights are when they are in their homes or in a private location. They know that they don't have to open the door to ICE. And that's why we work really hard to ensure that everybody is aware of what their rights are, and that in the event that they might be at risk for immigration enforcement, that they have a plan in place for protecting their family and for knowing what the next steps may be along the process.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Vishal, I'm going to direct the next question we have in the chat for you. What should I do if I see ICE take someone in public, or if I hear that they are in my neighborhood? Is there any kind of tips that you can recommend people do?
Yeah, obviously that's an incredibly scary thing. Sophia should feel free to jump in and add anything if I miss anything. But I think I would try to get as much information as safely can about, what's happening, the person being taken, if you see that happening, and which agencies are involved in the action. And then I would report this to uh, a rapid response hotline. Several of them across the country have been set up so in the Northern Virginia area and DC area, there's the Migrant Solidarity Mutual Aid Hotline. That's available. I know that, in around my kids' school, for example, most of the parents have these cards that kind of provide information. You can also look that up online to get information about their phone numbers and that kind of thing. In Virginia, there's another hotline run by a group called Poder VA, and their number is 844 alert VA. And so the information that gets shared with these hotlines gets shared with the immigrant community. They can and the people working volunteering with these groups can help match people up with any available resources, and that information can kind of filter over to attorneys and other organizations that are working on these issues.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we work closely with these organizations as well. So, a lot of the way that we get referrals for cases might come from a rapid response hotline. Even if people don't know directly our number or ways to reach us, they might have more connections with these rapid response hotlines, and they identify patterns that we might bring in to work with, a case or an individual, and offer them any services that we can provide as well. You're on mute, Eden.
I just realized I was muted. Apologies. I was going to say that there are some additional great questions in the Q&A section of the chat, and so I realize we are not going to have time to answer them all in this panel, but we are going to try to type out answers as best as we can to people who are asking some of these really excellent questions, and be able to get you updates and answers as we go. Now, given that, I think that is probably all we have time for. So I want to thank Sophia and Vishal for that overview. And let me just say again, immigrants' rights is only one of the 6 issue areas that we work on here at the ACLU of Virginia. Unfortunately, we have seen attacks on them all: voting rights, LGBTQ rights, the First Amendment, pretty much you name it. So our work has been to hold the line across all of our civil rights and our civil liberties as best as we can. And I'm really proud of our staff's ability to do that. And we are so grateful to all of you who support our work, because it takes real resources for us to do this. To hold the line today, we have to be in it for the long haul, and it's your support and membership that allow us to do that. So without further ado, I'd like it to turn it over to my colleagues for our next panel on how we're not just defending our civil rights and civil liberties, but how we are proactively fighting to expand them, which is very exciting. So Amy, can I turn it over to you and the policy team?
Thank you so much, Eden, and thanks for that great panel. It's great even knowing the work, hearing about it all over again from you all. My name is Amy Woolard. I'm the Chief Program Officer here at ACLU of Virginia, and Eden has it exactly right. Truly protecting our rights means getting out ahead of attacks and being very proactive. So to talk a little bit about how we're doing that, I have with me here Chris Kaiser, our Policy Director, and Kylie Moss, our Policy Counsel. And for this panel, just like with the last one, if folks have questions while we're talking, we'd love if you could drop them in the Q&A rather than the chat, and we will try to get them either on this panel or type out some answers for you as we go. So Chris, I wonder if you can kick us off. None of our work happens in a vacuum, and you all may have heard we had a little election here in Virginia last week. Chris, I'd love if you could talk in a little more depth about those election results and what they make possible going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Amy. So last Tuesday, as you all probably know, was a massive night for candidates who pledged clearly and unapologetically that they would work to defend and advance our fundamental freedoms. Now, you know, we're a nonpartisan organization, but more than a year ago, our team decided to invest in educating Virginia voters specifically about the House of Delegates and Attorney General races, because the stakes were too high not to. You know, the Commonwealth has been a beacon for progress in the South. Sadly, but proudly, we are the only state in the region without a ban on abortion or gender-affirming care for youth. But even beyond that, we have strong ballot access measures like our 45-day early voting period and same-day registration. But it's no exaggeration to say that we have been just one House of Delegates election away from the tides turning and all of those things we take for granted being taken away, just like the rest of the South. And so last Tuesday was a watershed moment for the balance of power in the Commonwealth. The Attorney General's race in particular was monumental for civil rights. We saw a candidate who pledged consistently and clearly to defend Virginians from the Trump administration's assaults on our rights, unseat an incumbent Attorney General who had used his office to petition the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade, who for 4 years has been dedicated to using long incarceration as a hammer on people and communities who are trying to work towards security and advancement, and who has used the office to undermine democratic access to the ballot box, and who's been complicit at best in the face of the Trump administration's terrorizing our immigrant and LGBTQ communities. There is now hope for transformational progress, both in that office and the House of Delegates and the General Assembly as a whole. We all know the threats from DC have not gone away, but Virginia just got a lot stronger. And so the question now is, what do we do with that strength? We do have a blueprint to advance civil rights and civil liberties in 2026. It is ambitious, but it's necessary, and it's also within reach, but only if we do it together. So looking forward to talking to you more about that. Amy, I'll send it back to you for now.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's difficult to encapsulate all the opportunity that unfolded last week, but you did a great job of doing it in just a couple of minutes. So every year we know lawmakers go to Richmond for legislative session, and that's where they debate and ultimately either pass bills into law or don't advance them, sometimes often thousands of bills each session. Now we're nonpartisan, as Vivian said, and we do really extensive work every year to try to block bad bills from becoming law and push to pass good ones from our agenda. So now that we know who will actually be in office, Kylie, Can you tell us a little bit about the bills that we're working on come January?
Sounds good. Thank you, Amy. So we have a really exciting legislative agenda coming up. We have a few issue areas that we're focused on, and things are ever evolving. So the first piece of legislation I'm happy to talk about is our second look legislation. So this is a multi-year effort with growing momentum as other states, just as recently in our sister jurisdiction, Maryland, they have passed similar reforms. And so our coalition is hoping we can get it done this year in Virginia. For those of you who may not be familiar with this type of legislation, Second Look gives judges an opportunity to take a second look at folks who are serving lengthy sentences and taking into consideration things like rehabilitation and changes in the law. It creates a real pathway for release, and it recognizes the hard work that people do to heal and grow and change while incarcerated. Another exciting piece of legislation that we are working on, so building upon Senator and now Lieutenant Governor-elect Hashmi's prior SHIELD bill, this bill we're working on would provide protections for Virginia providers and patients accessing lawful health care in the Commonwealth. So we know that Virginia providers are already treating patients from across the South and the country due to extreme abortion bans in other states. And so this bill would help protect them from criminal prosecution by other states for providing care in Virginia that is legal and necessary for patients. And so by providing these protections for patients and providers, we are also in turn preserving access to care for Virginians. The third piece of legislation we're focusing on is an amendment to the VHRA, so the Virginia Human Rights Act. So across levels of government, policies and harmful rhetoric are targeting trans Virginians in ways that endanger their safety and limit their access to public health and undermine their basic human rights. And so that is why we are supporting an amendment to the VHRA to ensure that everyone, especially trans and other marginalized groups, can learn, work, and participate in society without discrimination or fear. This amendment would ensure public institutions are fully covered by our anti-discrimination laws. It would also protect access to education, employment, and public life for all Virginians. And it would also close gaps highlighted by the recent Court of Appeals decision, I believe in 2023, related to sovereign immunity. So this would include an express waiver to ensure rights are real and enforceable for everyone. And building up on the previous panel and their focus on immigration. So we have some immigrant defense legislation that we are supporting. Like Eden said, since last year, immigration arrests in Virginia are up 358%. And so we believe our communities are stronger when families feel safe and when state systems serve everyone, not the federal deportation agenda. And so we'll support legislation that would prevent Virginia systems and resources from being co-opted into ICE enforcement and protecting immigrant communities from surveillance, detention, and family separation. We also want to protect access to justice by making courts safe and accessible to everyone, as justice cannot be done when people are afraid to walk through the door. Survivors of crime and witnesses cannot participate in the judicial process safely. And I'll go ahead and pass it to Amy.
Thanks so much, Kylie. I know I rest easier knowing Kylie and Chris are going to be in the halls of the General Assembly every day. It takes a lot of endurance. Thank you for that summary of some of our work, and we will keep you all posted on those as we go. But maybe the biggest piece of work that hung in the balance from this year's election is our campaign to pass not one, but 3 constitutional amendments to Virginia's Constitution. Chris, can you tell us a little bit about what these amendments are and what they may make possible for Virginians?
Would love nothing more. So a few minutes ago, I told you all that this election cycle set us up for transformative progress. And among the most consequential things that are now within our reach are, as Amy said, not one, but 3 amendments to the Virginia Constitution. These amendments would enshrine a fundamental right to reproductive freedom, including the right to an abortion. It would abolish Virginia's Jim Crow policy of permanent felony disenfranchisement, and one would enshrine the right to marry the person you choose. Now, I want to talk about each of those, but as a quick refresher, here's the reason that the House of Delegates elections were so important this cycle. Virginia happens to have a convoluted multi-year process to amend the state constitution. We actually began this process in 2024 when legislators introduced the constitutional amendments for the 2025 legislative session. And those passed earlier this year, which was great. But before any of us are allowed to actually vote on them, the Assembly has to pass them a second time next year. And so that means that last week, if voters had elected a House majority that didn't want to pass them in 2026, each one of those amendments would have been stopped in their tracks right then and there. And it was for that reason that throughout the election cycle, we made it our motto that every single House of Delegates race was a front line in the right for our civil rights. And so now we're off to the races to put these CAs on the statewide ballot next year. And for all three of these measures, I just want to make clear, enshrining fundamental freedoms in the Constitution, what that means is that they're better protected from shifting political winds in the elections that you all know Virginia holds every single year. That long process I just spoke about means it would be no small task to undo these protections once we get it done. So with that context, I want to get really concrete here about the world we're working to build and what these amendments will make possible. First, the Reproductive Freedom Amendment. I think everybody here can agree that every person has a fundamental human right to make decisions about how, when, and whether to have a child, to have an abortion, to use contraception, to manage a pregnancy, and access any reproductive health care. These are decisions that are at the heart of what it means to have freedom and autonomy, not only over one's own body, but over our futures and those of our loved ones. These decisions should be left to Virginians and their families, period, full stop. And healthcare providers, too, need to be able to act in the best interest of their patients without governmental interference. That is the future we want to protect. And this amendment would mean that politicians can't pass a ban on abortion or anything else in the future, even if they want to, at least not without amending the Constitution. The Second Amendment, the Rights Restoration Amendment, would automatically restore civil rights, including the right to vote, to people who have completed their prison sentences and have returned to the community. You probably know that the practice of disqualifying voters based on criminal convictions has an ugly racist history in the US. As the federal government withdrew from Reconstruction efforts after the Civil War, Virginia and other former Confederate states selectively prosecuted freed Black citizens in order to remove them from the voting rolls and undermine growing Black political power across the South. Still today, about 1 in 8 Black Virginians is disqualified from voting based on a felony conviction, well above the national average. In total in Virginia, more than 300,000 people can't vote because of a felony. Worse still, Virginia currently stands alone in giving our governor complete and total power to decide arbitrarily who deserves to have their rights restored. And so today, Virginia, the former seat of the Confederate capital, remains the nation's radical outlier on this issue. But this constitutional amendment would end that, immediately restoring hundreds of thousands to participate in our democracy. And finally, the Marriage Equality Amendment will guarantee that every person has the right to marry the person they want, regardless of sex or race. And it would finally repeal current language in the Constitution defining marriage as between a man and a woman. That is more than symbolic, let me be clear. Even as the Supreme Court just today punted on a request to overturn the right to same-sex marriage, we know that opponents of equality will not stop. Passing this amendment would ensure that no matter what the Supreme Court may do in the future, we respect and affirm the right to marry here in the Commonwealth. So I wasn't kidding when I said our plans are ambitious, but again, they are within reach for us right now, and we can't wait to achieve this and more with your help. Amy, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you so much, Chris and Kylie, both, for that overview of our work. I think we have time for some questions. I'm going to look in the chat. I love seeing all of them there. The first one, I love the first one because it allows us to talk about our integrated advocacy. Aren't you suing Virginia's felony disenfranchisement? Why do we need a constitutional amendment to Chris, this feels like one for you, having just done a little overview there, so I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad you asked. Well, so I mean, there's a lot to say about this. This is another one that goes back to like post-Civil War history. We won't get into that totally right now, but just so you know, I mean, these things are complementary. We have a lawsuit that challenges aspects of the felony disenfranchisement regime in Virginia, but it complements. It does something different than the constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment basically attacks the back end of the system so that when people complete their sentences and they're returning home, then they get their rights back automatically without having to go through any other hoops. What our lawsuit challenges is the front end of the system. Basically, there are a bunch of felonies. We have more than 1,000 felonies in Virginia, and a lot of those are actually prohibited under federal law, we argue, from resulting in disenfranchisement in the first place. So basically, if we prevailed in our lawsuit and we passed the constitutional amendment, everybody who had lost their rights based on a felony would get their rights back when they left prison. But also, many, many, many people would immediately be restored anyway because the felony that they were convicted of shouldn't have been eligible for disenfranchisement in the first place. So these things really fit together.
Thank you so much for that. And I see, as we are, there's a lot of interest in the constitutional amendments with our crowd tonight. So assuming these 3 amendments pass in the legislature this coming session, here's a question from the chat. When would we expect to see them on a ballot for voter approval? Would that happen in November 2026? Or is it possible that could happen earlier, especially if the redistricting amendment comes up to a vote in the spring? Easy question for our panel to handle. I'm going to gracefully let you all take that one.
Yeah, I'll take a stab. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball. I can tell you that the desire and the intent of everybody that we've talked about is for these 3 amendments to go on the ballot in November of next year. Never say never. We'll be talking with people, of course, but I think that's the plan. And so the redistricting one may move earlier, but so far the plan is for the other 3 to move later.
Great. Thank you so much. Just looking for some more questions in the chat. Let's see. Kylie, I'm going to pass one to you. We have in the chat, I'm intimidated by the General Assembly. How do I stay involved and informed?
Totally, yes, that's a totally understandable feeling. So here are some ways I like to stay informed about what's happening with the GA. First, you need to know who your legislators are. So you can go straight to their website, the General Assembly's official website, by typing in your address, and it will tell you your legislators. And then once you have their names, what I would recommend is signing up for their newsletters, or if you prefer social media, I would follow them, as many of them do have their own accounts where they post updates about the work that they're doing during session and also in between sessions. Another site that we use pretty often is LIS, which stands for the Legislative Information System. There you can find pretty much every bill that's been introduced, who's sponsoring it, and you can track it in real time. You can also look up key committee hearings and seeing when bills are being heard. There's also VPAP, the Virginia Public Access Project, and it's a really great nonpartisan source of information about the General Assembly. You can look up the individual members and see different information about that. I think they even have election results on there as well. It's a really great website to poke around on. And then obviously, finally, you can follow organizations like the ACLU Virginia or other groups working on issues that you care about. They have social media pages. We have social media pages as well. I'm sure our comms folks will put our handles in the chat for you all if you're not following already. And there you can see essentially what we are doing, as well as our partner organizations are doing during the session, as well as concrete ways to get involved. So many folks come to the General Assembly building to participate in lobby days, to meet with other advocates, to sit in committee hearings, and also, citizens have the opportunity to come and testify in support or against introduced bills. So there's plenty of ways to stay involved. And yeah, that information will probably be in the chat.
Thank you so much, Kylie. I'm going to put in a special plug to get connected on our issues that I know my colleague Jamshid will talk about a little bit later in our session tonight about how to stay connected to the things you're hearing about tonight. I think we have time for one more question. I want to thank Robin for lifting this up in the chat as well. What can we do about immigration abuses now that the elections went well? What can we do at the state level to ban voluntary police cooperation or require much better conditions in the detention facilities? I will open that up to the team.
Happy to jump in on this. Yeah, as Kylie was kind of alluding to earlier, I think there's going to be a ton of conversation at the GA about various ways to protect immigrant communities. To that point, I think you were describing restrictions or bans on local formal agreements between local police and ICE, commonly called 287G agreements. That will be a hot topic. I think the long and the short of it is that these are voluntary agreements. There is no requirement for local police to participate in civil immigration enforcement. 7 states, Delaware being the most recent one, have already placed a statewide ban on local law enforcement cooperation on this level. We would absolutely support restrictions on that. In addition, there's a lot that the state can do to protect sensitive locations. Kylie was talking about courthouses, but I saw a couple comments in the chat about polling places, and we also hear about hospitals and schools and places of worship. We'll be taking a close look at what protections we can put on all of those types of locations so that people can live and thrive in the Commonwealth.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you. I think that's about all we have time for this panel. And of course, especially with all of this proactive work, we're really going to need a groundswell of Virginians behind us. So I want to say thank you, Chris and Kylie, for talking about our work. And I want to reiterate to everyone here tonight, I'm so grateful to all of you who support our work. It takes real resources and connection to do this. It takes you mobilizing people in your communities, your family, your circles to do this work alongside us. So to talk more about how to join the fight, now that we've talked about the fight, I'm going to pass it over to our organizing director, Jamshid Bakhtiari, who's going to share some opportunities for you to get involved. Jamshid?
Great. Thanks, Amy. So for everyone that doesn't know me, my name is Jam. I'm the Director of Organizing at the ACLU of Virginia. And in our last couple of minutes together, I want to highlight some of the ways that you can join the ACLU of Virginia. For some folks, that will look like becoming a literal card-carrying member of the ACLU. The ACLU of Virginia has close to 40,000 members, and we've almost doubled our membership since Trump was inaugurated this past January. That's really exciting because that means that there are that many more Virginians that know their rights, that many Virginians more in communities that are informed advocates that people can turn to, and that many more Virginians that are a part of our movement. So if you do nothing else, please spread the word to your friends and family that becoming a member of the ACLU of Virginia is a critical step in the fight. We've got a link in the chat or a QR code to make that easy for you. Holidays are coming up, and becoming a member of an organization fighting for our rights could be a really great gift. But there is more you can do. As you heard from Chris and Kylie, legislative session is coming up. Lawmakers need to hear from Virginians like you. We make it super easy to talk to them, and you can actually do that right now in your own community through something we call clapback teams. Clapback stands for Community-Led Action for People, and these are basically hyper-local volunteer squads organizing in their own communities. If you're tired of seeing your school board or city council ignore your rights, this is your crew. The QR code on the screen or the link in the chat will take you to the form where you can sign up, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. No matter how you choose to get involved with us, I hope one thing is clear. We literally can't do this work without y'all. It takes our collective people power. If there's one thing we know, it's that the power of the people is stronger than the people in power. We are meeting the urgency of the moment, and we are in this for the long haul. Thanks to you. We're really grateful for y'all being here with us tonight, and we're grateful for y'all making the ACLU Virginia what it is. It really does take all of us. So next time, let's fight for our freedoms together.